disruptive.
Weird thing to happen.
So the Israel economy is collapsing, folks. This is not a joke. The Israeli economy is collapsing, and politicians are in panic. God forbid they might have to pay for their own yachts this time. According to Gen X Girl, she states Israel is a zombie economy. And this guy here, he's an Israeli scholar, Shir Hiver, says all economic indicators show Israel's economy has collapsed, and no sane person should give Israel any credit or accept repayment on Israel bonds. So why is our government passing laws to force us to purchase Israel bonds? So Israel is falling apart as they continue on the devastating genocide against Gaza, against Palestine. They're ramping up more warfare because Netanyahu is caught in the corner. People are just despised with Netanyahu and the Zionist cult that continuously keep going with this. And Netanyahu has to keep this war going because he knows that he's tried by international law warfare court. He has lawfare against him in even the state of Israel, and even Israelis are despised by Netanyahu. There was massive protests in Tel Aviv. People are leaving Israel by a mass drove. There's a massive exodus of people leaving Israel. There's a brain drain of people of Israel. So things are not looking good. Things are not looking good. People are boycotting their products. So here's the guy here, the Israeli scholar, going to explain to people that Israel is in a state of panic and they have to now go after the United States, go after their politicians to demand Americans bail out Israel. Bail out Israel and buy these horrible bonds that does not help people. They're forcing Americans to buy foreign bonds that are failing Americans. Listen to this.
Field, Pacifica Radio. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and we are joined today by Dr. Shir Hever, who's a scholar of Israel's occupation, apartheid, and genocide. Born in Israel and now living in Germany. He is a member of the Jewish Voice for a Just Peace. He's the managing director of the Alliance for Justice Between Israelis and Palestinians, and his latest book is The Privatization of Israeli Security. Dr. Hever, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to start by asking you about the state of Israel's economy, which I've talked about on the show before, but the last time I did was like a year ago. And already then people were saying that it's an absolute mess. Could you give us a picture of the economy as it is today? We're recording this on Tuesday, July 29th. What has the genocide, the attacks on Syria and Lebanon, what has all of this done to Israel's economy?
I call the Israeli economy a zombie economy because every economic indicator, every analysis conducted by professionals is saying that the Israeli economy doesn't really exist anymore. It has collapsed to the point that no sane person should give Israel any credit. The bonds that Israel is selling around the world are sold for political reasons. The only ones who are buying these bonds are just trying to finance Israel's genocide and are not really interested in making an interest payments on these bonds because it's very unlikely that Israel will ever be able to pay back those bonds. So this is a deeper level of crisis than we've seen in economic crises of the 21st century, like in Argentina or in Greece, where the economy collapses, but the state doesn't collapse because the state institutions continue to exist. The state can still rebuild the economy, maybe reissue a new currency, make some kind of debt repayment program. This is not the case with Israel because the institutions themselves are falling apart. But nevertheless, the killing continues. The soldiers continue to fight. Those soldiers who are still deployed in Gaza. And a lot of people in Israel are continuing to live their lives as if nothing has happened. And even what is really glaring is the stock exchange in Israel, which is rising. So these things, I think, are a lesson for us in how capitalist economy works, because we live in a kind of information age in which material things don't influence the economy the way they used to in the 20th century. And people really assign value to things like stocks based on their predictions of the future. And Israel is in a state of deep delusion. So it's not an information economy, it's a disinformation economy. And this is what makes it possible for this zombie economy to keep trotting along, even though it doesn't really have any life in it anymore.
So there's a scholar perfectly illustrating how Israel is wrecking itself the more it gets involved with this genocide. They like to think that this is helping Israel, that the Greater Israeli Project, the fundamentals of the Zionist cult, the Zionist fascist cult, because that was the organization it started with. It was Zionist fascism. They think that fulfilling this prophecy, this legacy of destroying and wiping out populations of people, starving them to death, going after children, killing journalists, is benefiting the country, but the country is actually falling apart. Hence why they have to maliciously go after their so-called allied nations, blackmail, deceive them, and hold them ransom to bring in more money to their genocide. That's why they're demanding the United States go after their own people. That's why they're going after Canada. That's why they go after the UK. They're holding the whole entire world ransom for the heinous act that they're doing to their own people, to the heinous act they're doing to their own country. Because they know from the start this war was terrible for their economy. They know how bad it is. The Israelis were protesting against Netanyahu before October 7th, and then Netanyahu created basically October 7th. We know that he was told about this. We know that the Netanyahu government paid Hamas many, many years with suitcases of money to facilitate in Palestine so Palestinians can't be liberated. We all know about this. And they need October 7th as the precursor to start this genocide, to start the catastrophe. And it has done nothing but harm for everybody. Not just for the Palestinians, not just for us, but even for the Israelis. Which is why more and more Israelis are fleeing the country. Because they are sick and tired of this. They're sick and tired. They are demanding Netanyahu be resigned and be criminally prosecuted so they can protect the hostages. But Netanyahu isn't going to save the hostages. He purposely is not going to save the hostages. He'd rather have the hostages dead than save them. Why? Because it would give him more and more of an excuse, give him more and more of a leverage to continue facilitating this onset slaughter of mass populations. And it isn't just Gaza. It ain't just Gaza, folks. It's the entire state of Palestine. They're going after the West Bank. They went after Lebanon. They went after Syria. They took over that. They brought an Al-Qaeda terrorist to now become leader of Syria. They're going to do referential damage to neighboring countries. You've heard the Samson option. You might want to read into that because it's coming, folks. It is coming, folks. And it is scary. It is scary. Netanyahu orchestrating this is demonic. And anyone that is supporting this is demonic. And if you think for a second that this is some sort of biblical prophecy, that you're proclaiming the words of the Bible and Jesus Christ coming down to save you from the rapture, anything like that is complete bonkers. You're trapped in a cult. You're trapped in a death cult. Okay, Netanyahu is like the new Jonestown. Remember that guy? The guy in the 70s that promised, a greater vision, that you're going to be promised with a paradise, and he brought people to South America. And then guess what? They all died. They all got wiped out because Jim Jones, the reverend who started Jonestown, was being investigated. So he rather wiped out the population than be properly investigated by the FBI and realizing that he started this cult. Rather than getting justice, he rather wipe out an entire population. That's what Netanyahu's doing. That's what Netanyahu's doing to his own people in Israel. Hence why Israel sued the IDF on the day of October 7th. Israel sued the IDF. They didn't go after Palestine. They didn't sue the Palestinian government or the Liberation or Hamas. They directly went and sued the IDF. Because the IDF shot at Israelis, or the Hannibal Directive. They shot at Israelis from Apache helicopters. So, no doubt, their economy is collapsing. No doubt this is happening. And this is scaring the bejesus out of the American politicians. Why? Because they get their millions from AIPAC. They get their millions from foreign investment and meddling into their campaigns by Israel. So here's Gen X Girl again, stating Florida is forcing local governments to buy unrated Israel bonds. They're forcing Americans to buy a foreign country's bond, unrated Israel bonds. They're forcing Americans to do this. What happened to the First Amendment? What happened to freedom? What happened to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? What happened to that? What happened to that? Now you're forcing people to buy unrated bonds from a foreign country? You're forcing people to do that? Why? Because otherwise they'd be anti-Semitic to do so if they choose not to. If they exercise their consumer right to choose what purchases they make. And here's why it's unrated. According to Gen X Girl here, it says credit agencies downgrade Israel bonds. Israel starts issuing unrated bonds. Unrated bonds are high risk. Florida local governments refuse to buy unrated bonds. However, the Florida state government, that's Ron DeSantis, Mr. Anti-Woke, we're going after Disney. How hilarious. How hilarious. We're going after Disney because we don't want woke. We don't want protected classes of the LGBTQ. But we will protect Israel. We'll protect our warmongers. We'll protect genociders. Because they're a special bunch. Florida state government passes law banning local governments from refusing to purchase unrated Israel bonds. How crazy that is. How crazy that is that the Florida state is going after individual communities for not bending the knee more to a collapsing foreign state. That isn't even really a state. In the words of RFK Jr., it's like an aircraft carrier. That's what Israel is. It's a military operation. It's a military operation that occupied directly in the territory of Palestine because strategically, it's there in place to monitor and track all the surrounding areas within the Middle East. That's why we resort to Israeli intelligence when it came to invading Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Somalia, the Sudan, you name it. I guess that's why we're such great partners in this. So, you want to know how much the state of Florida gives to these high-risk bonds? You want to know how much compensation the Florida state is giving to this foreign nation? Not to Florida. Not to Florida, not to hurricane victims, not to the homeless, not to, people in need. That would actually be an investment into the state of Florida, which you would gain back, and it would create a cycle. But no, give it directly to a foreign nation. You don't know how much they get? The state of Florida is calculating $984 million. $984 million. The state of Florida alone gives directly in compensation to Israel. And they even break down the specific counties. So there's Florida Israel bonds, $200 million. Miami-Dade County in Florida, $76 million. Broward County in Florida, $5 million. Palm Beach County, Florida. That's where Epstein had his estate. That's where I think Mar-a-Lago is. That's where all the rich billionaires are. Go figure. Go figure. They would put high investment into bonds that facilitate for a genocide. Funny how that works. And here, this guy ZMT says the worst part in these bonds they are a horrific investment, losing 20% year over year. So these are collapsing bonds. Americans being forced to buy collapsing bonds. That's not a smart investment. That's not a smart investment. They're collapsing year after year at 20%. You should not be buying these bonds, and you should not be forcing and mandating local communities and Americans to sucker into this. So Gen X Girl responds to it and says, and then there is the fact that they've lost 20% of their value because Israel bonds are high risk due to the war. Moody's reduced Israel's credit rating and warned it would fall into junk bonds status soon. So they're failing because the more Netanyahu continues on this genocide, it's collapsing these bonds. So would you think if you're mandating to buy into this pyramid scheme of these Israeli unrated bonds, you'd be demanding for the genocide to stop? You'd be yelling at Netanyahu to come to terms, come to negotiation, be as angry as the average Israeli in Tel Aviv? Even they know that this whole thing is a scam from the get-go. But the Florida state government, Ron DeSantis, is demanding people to be suckered into this pyramid scheme. Why? Because he's represented by AIPAC. He's got donor money. He doesn't want to lose that sweet, precious Zionist dope. And here, this guy here, this is the former American State Department officer, Matthew Hong, who I've seen before. I think he ran in a campaign once. I've definitely seen him before. A former American State Department officer, Matthew Ho, Jewish journalist, explains to even the dumbest of Americans, Israel's debt and expenses belongs to the American taxpayers. Whatever debt Israel's have is guaranteed by you, the foolish U.S. taxpayer. So that's the thing. All the years that you have subsidized Israel through your tax dollars, through funneling to build up their Iron Dome that magically did not work on October 7th. Go figure. This magical $1 billion dome didn't work for people in hand gliders and broken F-150s. Kind of interesting. But what this guy is going to tell you is that all the money you subsidize Israel should go right back to the American taxpayer. You should not be forking over more money to Israel. Israel should be paying you. Israel should be paying the American taxpayer for the catastrophic damages that they have done. But Ron DeSantis, from being bought out and being blackmailed and manipulated by possibly his AIPAC handler, is forcing Florida to go along with this. And here's Matthew Ho explaining that that's not the case.
What is your impression of the Israeli economy today from the time you just spent there?
It's in really bad shape. I think we've talked about this before, Judge. The numbers, in a sense of seeing the money leaving the country, the foreign investment not going into it, the 40,000 plus businesses have closed. One of the 4 major ports in Israel going bankrupt, those types of things. But, just saw other numbers, almost 35% decrease in imports and a similar decrease in exports in the last year. The numbers themselves show that Israel is in a perilous position. But there's a huge caveat to that, and I'll get to in a moment. But when I was there in Israel and in Palestine, you could see it. You could see this economic bleeding out occurring in real time. And the big thing where you see it is in the tourism. You see it in the fact that Israeli tourism is down about 75%.
Ooh.
And when you're in Jerusalem, it's empty. I'll give some examples. People may be familiar with this. Judge, we had a problem with our schedule one day because the Palestinians we were going to meet in Jerusalem weren't allowed to go in Jerusalem. This is a consequence of the apartheid policy of the Israeli government that Palestinians can't go places, Jerusalem or to other cities, what have you. So we had some free time. So we went to the Mount of Olives, and it was a beautiful Friday morning. Sky was blue, probably about 68 degrees. There should have been 1,000, 1,500 people, on the Mount of Olives, as there normally would be. We were the only group there. We were the only group of people for more than an hour at that spot. And then we walked down the hill to the Garden of Gethsemane and went into the Church of Nations down there. The same thing too. There was nobody else there. We went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. If anyone's ever been there, and for people who don't know, that's the site of Jesus' crucifixion and his burial. And normally you're there and it's like you're online for Space Mountain at Disney World, right? I mean, like it's a mob scene. Right. And no, it kind of reminded me of walking through a supermarket late at night. There's some people there, but it's not very busy. You saw this over and over again. I can give you a lot of examples of places you go into. You talk to the restaurant owners; they've laid off all their staff. The hotel we were staying at had no visitors, no hotel guests for the 10 months prior to our arrival, and then after we left, they were shutting down again. So you can just see that the emptiness, the consequence of this war in terms of the bankrupting of Israel. And of course, then if it's bad for Israel, it's worse for the Palestinians. So the Palestinians who've been under an economic strangulation for decades by the Israelis, well, a fifth of their workforce prior to October 7th worked in Israel. And this affects the Israelis as well. But since October 7th of 2023, that 200,000 Palestinian workforce has been unable to go into Israel to work. There's rumors that about 20 or 30,000 of those are still getting in because Israelis really do need them. But what you see then is in Palestine, in the West Bank, you see an unemployment rate of 60%. And we could go on with, different points. But the one caveat I want to mention, Judge, is, well, how is Israel surviving? How are they going to get by on this? And that's because of the United States loan guarantee. And the fact that the United States is a guarantor of Israeli debt. And so since last year, in the last 13 months, you've seen a 300 to maybe 300 or 400% increase in the amount of debt, the amount of bonds that Israel has issued. And you say, who's buying these things? Why would they be buying them, knowing the reality of the economic situation, the military situation, the political situation for Israel? Well, it's because these bonds, this debt is backed by the United States. We guarantee it. So it'd be like you or I getting a mortgage and having Elon Musk co-signing with us. And this is essentially where the Israelis come back on, why they're willing to go the way they are, why they're willing to allow themselves to be isolated by the world, to hurt themselves economically, to overextend, exhaust their military, to cause their own political chaos, friction. People talk about civil war. I don't think it'll get to that point, but it's also something that you just can't dismiss outright. And the point is that they can do it because the United States is going to continue to back them financially and be that guarantor, be that co-signer for them going forward.
There you go. Israel's economy is collapsing. Their support is collapsing as more and more countries are wakened to the horrific genocide. More and more people are protesting. Even Israelis are protesting against this. They're waking up to realize that Netanyahu basically manufactured this from the get-go as part of the prophecy for the Zionist cult. Zionists are even yelling at other Zionists. And as I stated, at this point, you're almost better off just admitting support for Palestine. Even if you're the most fanatical pro-Israel, if you're one of the, Jesus baiters that, want to suck people in and say, but, you gotta do this because Jesus Christ is going to come down and the rapture is going to happen and you got to be a part of this group because otherwise you'll be going straight to hell. Even if you're one of those people, it's not enough. It's not enough. You were never going to hold a candle to these Zionist perpetrators that will demonize other Zionists for not being 100% on board with their nefariousness. Look at what we saw with Rabbi Shmuley and Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is apparently not a good enough Jew to Rabbi Shmuley. Go figure. Go figure. So you're better off. You're better off at this point just admitting for Palestine and supporting Palestine and supporting the end to this horrific genocide, because either way, you're going to lose. Either way, whether you support Israel or not, you're going to lose. Because Israel and Netanyahu and the Mossad and all these nefarious, warmongering, bloodthirsty, demonic entities are going to siphon people in to this catastrophic damage that is going to affect every single one of you. And anyone that has read about the history of the foundation of modern day Israel, if you look at the history of military intervention, if you look as far back from the Nakba to 2014 to the documentaries that Dan Cohen and Max Blumenthal put together about killing God, you look at Abby Martin's reporting on this constantly. You look at people like Katie Halper. You look at people that have studied this through and through. The whole purpose of Israel is not for a safe space for Jews. Because as someone that supports Jewish people, I'm friends with Jewish people. I have nothing against Judaism. I think they're wonderful, fantastic people. They're funny people. Jews are the funniest people I know. But being hijacked by Zionism has completely diminished the whole purpose of Judaism, the whole background of the religion. And having this modern day cult, this modern death cult of Zionism in a way that just seems like a rendition of Jonestown through Netanyahu is dangerous. It's dangerous for everybody. It's dangerous for Jewish people. It's dangerous for Christians. It's dangerous for Catholics. It's dangerous for everybody. And they even stated through the Samson option that if Israel goes down, everybody else goes down to hell with them. So at this point, why would anyone want to put themselves out there knowing how catastrophically damaging it all is? Financially, physically, it harms you. It harms you. And now we're seeing that the Israeli state is collapsing. That people are leaving. Mass unemployment is exploding. They don't have enough to function a sustainable country. They don't have the function to sustain themselves. And Netanyahu and his militarized government, the IDF, continuously bombard other countries, surrounding areas, continuously go after Palestine, making the situation even worse. So at this point, your best option is just admit that the genocide is wrong, call for a complete ceasefire, call for a complete end to this nightmare, cut all the funding that goes into this, cut all the funding that goes into this, and admit that this whole thing, that Netanyahu is not your savior, that AIPAC has taken over America, and allied nations to the state of Israel are not allied nations because we're good friends. We're allied nations because Israel has got us. They have blackmailed us. They've deceived us. They manipulate us. They bring us in to this catastrophic cult. And you don't know what's going to happen to you next following this. So it's better to be informed and get out now before it becomes more and more just catastrophic.